Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's time to make some people angry. Love it. My favorite part of, well, everything, but, Michigan Week in particular. Get to do why Michigan is going to beat Ohio State guaranteed. Not a guarantee.
Yes, we are giving a full coverage to why Michigan is going to win the game on Saturday, just as our previous episode was why Ohio State is going to win. These are just thought exercises, okay? Just thought exercises. Remove your clicker, your mouse, your thumb pad from that thumbs down vote, okay? Just give us a shot here. Give us a chance. You don't have to reply negatively to everything. Sometimes you can reply positively to stuff. That's advice for life. You don't just need to leave bad reviews. You can leave good reviews. All right. Now, if you're going to leave a bad review about me lecturing you, that's understandable. But
welcome to Tony's first day on the internet. Don't worry. You don't have to be negative about everything. Oh, you must be new here.
Why am I here if I can't be negative? But Tom, today we're going to be positive. Positive that Michigan is going to beat Ohio State on Saturday. And cut. No, this is a thing that when you are on the internet like we are, and you're on Twitter and you see message board posts, the Michigan fan base has been confident about this game since they won last year's, because they expect it to be exactly like last year's, because they have this image of what Ohio State is. And it's a soft, it's a forgiving, it's, just weak, basically. And I don't know that that's entirely true, but Michigan has now proven last year's team and the program as a whole was not ready. And they come into this game having the experience and the knowledge and the understanding that they have beaten Ohio State. They can beat Ohio State. It's the testimony versus theory. Ohio State has theory. Michigan has testimony, because there's not many people on the Ohio State team that have a win on this in this game. Michigan, everybody back, did it last year. They know how to do it. They believe they will do it again. And I think there's something to that. Now, when you win 10 or 12 in a row, you start to take it for granted, perhaps. But there is, I think, a value and knowing what it took last year, replicating that, and then coming into this game with the confidence that you can do it again.
Absolutely, because you look at Ohio State going into last year, it was like the birthright for Ohio State that, of course, they're going to beat Michigan. They beat Michigan every year. You go back, we talk about this with recruits all the time, and it's like recruits now are saying, like, I remember growing up and watching Ezekiel Elliott, like, all right, we're all about to turn into dust. I get it. Yes, fine. But guys who were on Ohio State's team last year basically didn't remember Ohio State losing to Michigan. It was a thing that happened when they were still in elementary school. And, most of the recent years had been not particularly competitive. 2018 was a blowout. 2019 was a blowout. 2020, Ohio State was favored by 30. I mean, that was going to be maybe the biggest blowout in the history of the series, going back to, Ohio State losing 86-0 in Ann Arbor in 1902 or whatever it was. So there was no, you hadn't seen it, so you didn't believe it. Well, now Ohio State has seen it, and that can either set you up to really have a determined year of focused preparation, or that can put doubt in the back of your mind. If Ohio State is down in the third quarter, is the energy inside of Ohio Stadium going to be nervous energies? Is it going to get quiet? Is it going to get angry? You're going to get boos? We have not seen Ohio State have to play in that kind of situation in Ohio Stadium for a long time against Michigan. So that'll be, that's going to be kind of interesting to see how that all plays out.
Will there be nervous energy in Ohio Stadium if the game is close or Ohio State is trailing? Yes, there will be nervous energy, Tom. There will be murmurs. There will be cries, there will be shouts, there will definitely be some nervous energy. And then the question becomes, is there nervous energy on the Ohio State sideline as well? And that's where, is the delay of games that we've seen, things just stupid things like that. false start on a play that picked up 12 yards, or not a false start, but like an illegal formation is something where the offensive line has killed some drives of late. And you can't, especially in this game, where every 5 yards is a positive or negative. Like that, a 5-yard play can kill a drive or keep a drive alive. Because if you're stuck with a 1st and 15, good luck getting that first down. And if your offensive line is committing penalties like we've seen with this Ohio State team of late, that's just going to make things even worse. And that's one of the things that, as we talked about in a previous show about Ohio State winning, why they will win, we didn't really get into penalties. And I think penalties is something that Ohio State has been committing that can help the Michigan defense overcome any, they wouldn't see them as disadvantages, but can neutralize at least the big plays or some of the plays that come from these penalties.
Well, this is a game where Ohio State doesn't have the margin for error that they have in most of their other games this year, where, yeah, you could have a stupid false start penalty, you could take a delay of game penalty, and it's, oh no, now you have to go 15 yards against Rutgers in 3 plays instead of 10. Whatever will we do? That you've had a lot of that where the margin for error has been substantial, and you go into every game knowing that Ohio State's going to win, and the question's only by how much. Michigan's kind of had the same type of season for the most part, but now you've got to be a little more disciplined. And the challenge is, this is a game where everyone's wired a little more tightly, which means you probably are going to have more false start penalties. Are you going to have, as Ryan Day has said 100,000 times, are you going to be able to play with emotion and not let emotion play with you, not take the stupid personal foul penalty? Because there is a very fine line between being amped up and ready to play and being too amped up and making the one stupid mistake, which in a game like this, the one stupid mistake, whether it's, Ohio State doing their patented, get up to the line, look to the sideline, everyone stands there and scratches their head for a while, and then all of a sudden the play clock's at 2 and they either have to burn a timeout or they take a delay game penalty. We've seen that a lot this year, and that's something they've got to get straightened out this week, because going from, we talked in the Ohio State, how Ohio State wins show about the fact they've got to stay on schedule. If you're getting yourself in obvious passing situations by turning a 3rd and 2 into a 3rd and 7, well, guess who that benefits? That benefits Michigan. So you've seen just enough of that kind of silly stuff from Ohio State this year that you sort of wonder, are they going to be able to be focused enough to not have those kind of just sort of lapse of concentration kind of penalties this week? And the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's something you can't predict, but we've seen it enough to know that if it doesn't happen, that would be a surprise. And if they can overcome them, that would be another surprise, because it's obviously more difficult to overcome these penalties, especially a holding against a good defense and picking up that 20 yards that you'll need for that first down. So you need to obviously avoid those. Michigan coming into this game, having that understanding, having that knowledge, having that confidence, I think is, as we said, it's significant. The offensive line for Michigan and the line of scrimmage on the offensive side of things, that is a confidence booster for Michigan. You watched them against Illinois, and I know that game was close, but there were times where they were moving, pushing Illinois, a very good defensive line, back 3, 4, 5 yards so that Blake Corum could get his short yardage gain. And Ohio State has not faced an offensive line like this, and there's some mixing and matching on the Michigan offensive line at this point. There's some injuries, but they still play well together, and they still move piles, and they still do a lot of pulling, and they get their linemen out on an edge of sorts. And this is an Ohio State defense that likes to, they do their 4-2-5, and they've done well against, they've been able to keep from getting outnumbered at times, but this is going to be an entirely different animal than what they've seen, because it's an offense that loves to run, is good at it, does different things with the running game, and can overwhelm you physically up front, and then the running back just goes ahead and picks what's left, like picks the bones basically of the defense and gets his yards, but it starts up front with this offensive line that just moves people.
Right, yeah. If you're getting a situation where the running back's first contact is at 3 yards downfield, then you fall forward and all of a sudden it turns into 4-5. And that's if you don't make anyone miss. And going back, you watch the Michigan-Nebraska game. Michigan was just driving Nebraska down the field in that game. That was a really impressive offensive line performance. And this is an Ohio State defense that is a different Ohio State defense than it was last year. The Jim Knowles was brought in and paid $1.9 million specifically to win this game. That is why he is here. And there was a question during the interviews earlier this week that was essentially, is it kind of weird that we're here and it's the week of Thanksgiving and you have not reached, Ohio State's 3 goals this year are beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, win the national championship. Here we are, it's Thanksgiving. You haven't reached any of your goals yet. It's just been this 11-game preseason. And yeah, it's all looked good, but you haven't actually gotten to step 1 of the journey yet, because it's just sort of you could beat Rutgers. Yes, you could beat Toledo. Yes, but now can you do this thing? And I think, this is when you look at Michigan's offensive line, I think Michigan's offensive line of the 4 line units, I think Michigan's offensive line is the best of the 4. Ohio State offense and defense, Michigan offense and defense. Michigan's offensive line is the best of the 4. One of the stories I have tracked every single year for a million years is going back to 2002. The team that runs for more yards per carry in the game wins the game every single year. Michigan has outrushed Ohio State on a yards per carry basis 3 times since 2001. It was 2003, 2011, and 2021. There was one year, 2012, where they were even. Yeah, 2012, they were even. Every other year, Ohio State has outrushed Michigan on a yards per carry basis. So, with Michigan's offensive line being potentially the better one, how is Ohio State's defensive line going to hold up? Because Jim Knowles, his defense is geared around stopping the run, and he has that jack position with Jack Sawyer playing, and that's specifically designed to be a run disruptor. And you've seen the defensive line doing a great job of eating blocks and keeping the linebackers clean all year. Tommy Eichenberg has 2 broken hands this week. How is that going to impact things? Steel Chambers, how is he going to be able to stay clean this week? That's kind of the $64,000 question, because if Ohio State can kind of contain Michigan's run game, Ohio State wins the game. But when you have an offensive line as good as Michigan's, I think that's a tough challenge. I think that's not as easily said as done.
And the offensive line can only do so much, and not knowing what the situation is with Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards probably back, CJ Stokes, their true freshman, their number 3 running back. It's going to be a challenge for Michigan to be at their best running the ball. And so the offensive line is going to have to be at their best. And I think it may have been Ryan Hayes, left tackle, who said it, everybody's going to have to raise up their games. And so it's also going to require whoever is running the ball to raise up their game. But as we have talked about, Michigan has not seen anything like Ohio State's offense. Like the Ohio State defense, we assume it's good. We believe it's good, but they haven't, this has not been a schedule. The Big Ten is down this year. And so there's really no way to know for sure that you are ready for this. Now, I think they are helped by having an injured Blake Corum. And if Blake Corum was totally healthy, this would be a vastly different conversation. And yet, you look at who is the most the offense that Ohio State has faced that is most similar to Michigan. Is it Notre Dame back at the start of the season? Is it Penn State with a mobile-ish quarterback and some talented running backs? But none of those offensive lines are what Michigan's is. And so that's where I think you can try to project, but this defensive line hasn't faced anything like the Michigan offensive line. The Michigan offensive line continues to set the stage for the running game. But when you say Michigan is the offensive line is the number 1 of the 4 lines, I think the Ohio State defensive line is number 2 in that. But this is going to be their biggest test, and I'm interested to see how they do. It's going to be difficult for Michigan, and I know we're talking about why Michigan is going to win. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. This is going to be. It's made more difficult by the Blake Corum injury. But they can do other things. You can get Donovan Edwards involved. They can do some of get Ronnie Bell involved with the jet sweeps. Move Ohio State east-west so that it's easier to move north-south.
Yeah, they're going to have to be a little more creative. And, we did the, what is the best-case scenario for Ohio State, big blowout win kind of thing at the end of last show. We'll do that again for Michigan. I think it's going to be a close, the best case scenario for Michigan is a closer game than the best case scenario for Ohio State, which sort of tracks because Ohio State's a favorite in this game. But also, I don't think Michigan has the, absolute just offensive explosion scenario in there. I don't think I see a way that is there a way Michigan gets to 42 points again this year? I mean, they did it last year, but outside of defensive or special team scores, I don't think.
Right.
I think Michigan's path to win here is keep Ohio State under 30. If you keep Ohio State under 30 under Ryan Day, if Ohio State scores more than 30 points, they have won every single game under Ryan Day. When they've lost, it's been they scored 27 against Michigan, they scored 7-8 against Oregon last year. They score what was it in the Fiesta Bowl against 23 in the Fiesta Bowl against Clemson, 24 in the national championship game against Alabama. That's Michigan has to take the air out of the ball, long drives, keep the chains moving, keep Ohio State's offensive off the field. If Ohio State has 10 possessions, that's a game Michigan can win. If Ohio State has 14, 15 possessions, I don't think that's a game Michigan's going to win. So can Michigan keep the ball moving on the ground? Efficient drives, not necessarily explosive. I mean, they'll take the explosive plays if they can get them, but I don't think that those explosive plays are like truly necessary for Michigan to win. You hit one downfield on a pass and you have, throw a wheel route to Donovan Edwards and he hits another one. I mean, you could see it happening that way. And then, we still don't know if Luke Schoonmaker's back. If Luke Schoonmaker's back, and then you've got Colston Loveland, you got a couple tight ends. And again, you're not going to, we always say you can't build your offense around passes to the tight end, but you can pick up first downs on passes to the tight end. If both of those guys are 5'4", 55 yards or something like that, like, okay, that's a winning formula for Michigan where you're just sort of keeping, Colston Loveland picks up a 3rd and 8 with a 12-yard reception. It's not a huge explosive play, but it keeps the chains moving and you keep, and then JJ McCarthy. Can JJ McCarthy pick up, 3 first downs with his legs, 4 first downs with his legs? He doesn't have to, run for 700 yards. Can he pick up a couple key first downs on 3rd and 6, or is Ohio State going to be able to contain him? Like that, that's the stuff. It's Michigan's path to win is a bunch of like 10, 12-yard plays that you just kind of sequence together, keep that Ohio State offense off the field.
And then you hit the occasional bomb that has eluded Michigan to this point. And I want to talk about JJ McCarthy because earlier in the week I said they may need him to be Troy Smith, 2004 Troy Smith in this one. And so I went and looked. I've got Troy Smith's 2004 game log, and the game before Michigan, they played Purdue and lost. Troy Smith was 14 of 29 for 192 yards, threw 3 interceptions, carried the ball 16 times for 62 yards. But then came the Michigan game, opened up throwing deep to Gonzo on Ernest Shazor, but he threw for 241 yards and 2 touchdowns and ran the ball 18 times for 145 yards and a touchdown. And basically it was, Troy, go do it. Go get us there because Ohio State couldn't run the ball in 2004. And they needed as much playmaking as they could get. Now, Ted Ginn, Santonio Holmes, Anthony Gonzalez are not walking through Michigan's doors to have JJ McCarthy to throw to, but he is a guy that can make plays happen, and he can pick up some yards rushing, and he has the confidence, maybe the cockiness to do more. And if the running game isn't there, you have to ask him to do more. You can't play so scared that, well, we don't want to throw the ball. Well, if you can't run and you're not going to throw the ball, how do you expect to win? I think at this point, he is a guy that is talented enough to be unleashed. And this is a game that things that have not happened at times throughout the season tend to happen. Like I go back to like Fitzgerald Toussaint busting a big run or Devion Smith busting a big run. Like these guys haven't had big runs during their time, but then they play Ohio State, which had a good defense at the time, and then those guys will have like 140-yarder. So I'm expecting 1 or 2 connections downfield from JJ McCarthy. But if he's a guy that is running around making plays, because I think he throws better on the run than he does standing in the pocket, and then also tucks some of those passes and go. Ohio State, like all defenses, having trouble with the running quarterback. Get some read option in there, I think also helps your running game. It doesn't just have to be scrambles. Get some read option in there. And if JJ McCarthy is your leading ball carrier, I don't see that as an automatic loss for Michigan. I see that as you are using your best playmakers when you absolutely have to, and that's how you win.
Right. This goes back to Urban Meyer and JT Barrett, and how you would never see JT Barrett run a bunch against Rutgers or Indiana. You saw JT Barrett run 3 times, 5 times against those teams, and then you'd run them 18 times against Penn State or Michigan. It sure feels like that's going to be, especially if Corum and Edwards are, compromised / out. It feels like that's where Michigan has to, take advantage of things. And that feels like that's where this game is a little bit different than some of the past games, where in the past, if Michigan had the one, their Heisman type player compromised / out, they were just doomed. This year, you go back to the beginning of the year, we were talking about the fact that, the Cade McNamara, JJ McCarthy quarterback battle, and what a mystery, what's going to happen in these 2 games. The whole reason you put JJ McCarthy in there is because JJ McCarthy can do things that Cade McNamara can't do, can extend plays, can make plays that you just, they have had, you go back over the years through Michigan quarterbacks, and it's a lot of John Navarre and Chad Henne, and they've had the occasional Denard Robinson, and Devin Gardner's not quite, he's sort of in that mix, but there's just been a lot of John O'Korn and the John Navarre to John O'Korn type quarterback, and this is a quarterback that can do stuff that is very difficult to account for. It changes the numbers in the run game, and it forces Ohio State to be a little more responsible in the pass rush. If you've got a statue back there, if you overrun the quarterback, it's not a big deal, because it's like, well, what is John Navarre going to do? He's going to run out and pick up a loss of 2 yards. Okay, wow, what a devastating blow that is. If you are over aggressive in the pass rush and you leave a lane for JJ McCarthy, that's a first down. That's 20 yards. It can be 15, 20 yards. I mean, that's a much bigger deal. So this is a luxury that Michigan has not necessarily had for a while in the QB in their offense. And it's something that in this kind of situation, that is something they're probably going to have to lean on to try to make some stuff happen.
Let's go to the other side of the ball, where when Ohio State has faced the best defenses, they don't run the ball very well. Michigan, so far, statistically, one of the best defenses in the nation. And so that, to me, is a gigantic concern, because if they can't run the ball, then they become one-dimensional. And they threw the ball for 394 yards last year against Michigan, and what did it get them? Got them a 15-point loss. And Michigan has shut everybody down in the run game this year, and Ohio State has been able to be shut down. So there's every reason to believe that this is going to be a difficult task for Ohio State to run the ball, because when they've been faced with this physical test against a couple of other teams, Iowa being one of those, they've not passed it. And it was 2 games where they had the inability to run the ball. They were held under 100 yards, and it's only been 2 games, and they've bounced back since, and they were fine before that. But when you see what is possible, and that is possible because we've seen it, those 2 bad games, and you match that up with Michigan's run defense that has played a nickel defense for much of the year, but has been able to stop running attacks throughout the season. This is an area where I think Michigan fans and Michigan themselves are very confident, and I think they have reason to be confident until they're proven otherwise.
Yeah, and Ohio State's offensive line has held up pretty well in pass pro this year. They really have not given up many sacks. The interior of the offensive line in the run game has not been great. They have had issues running the ball a bunch this year. Some of that is running backs trying to bounce too many plays outside. Some of that is some predictability in terms of formation and all that kind of stuff, which I would guess they will have corrected for this week. Any predictability may have been set up for, something changing this week. But, if the interior of your offensive line can't get off the ball on the ground, that's going to be a problem. And Mozzie Smith, when he was talking earlier this week on Monday, he said, he was asked, how long does it take before you feel like you kind of know what's going to happen to the game or how the game's going to go? Is it a drive or 2 before you're really into the game? He's like, no, man, it's like 2 plays. It's like if I'm pushing on that guy ahead of me, if I put hands on that guy ahead of me and he starts going backwards, it's like, all right, we're good. We're cool. And I mean, how confident, Tony, are you that Mozzie Smith going against Luke Whippler or Donovan Jackson, or, and we haven't even talked about the fact that Matt Jones is injured and left the Maryland game on crutches and with a walking boot. And is it Matt Jones, who's not been healthy all year? Is it Enoch Vamahi? Is it Josh Fryer? Who is that guard this week? That feels like that's, that could be a real issue for Ohio State in terms of being able to run the ball. Because if the interior of that line is clogged up, or you have someone kind of bursting through, or you constantly have to double team the one guy, you run into a numbers issue. And that feels like something that could be an issue for Ohio State this week.
Yeah, and they have active defensive linemen, as we talked about on the last show. And let's keep in mind, like, Luke Whippler is not 100% either. He's dealing with a foot or an ankle each week as well. And DeJuan Jones missed the previous game to this past week and still looks like he's not 100% either. So there will be opportunities for the Michigan defensive line. Look at Chris Jenkins, defensive lineman, is third on the team with 43 tackles this year. So, like, they're active. And as you mentioned, Mozzie Smith, he's number 6 with 39 tackles. These guys make plays at the line of scrimmage. They don't necessarily get into the backfield a ton. They're interior linemen, so that's not necessarily their job. Their job is to hold the point of attack, and they do that really well, and that's where it starts. And then you get to so do you just run outside more? But they can also meet the running backs there and blow stuff up to keep it from getting outside. So those are 2 guys that you have to be concerned with, and they're going against an offensive line, as you said, on the interior that has some issues. So that is going to be something that Ohio State is going to deal with. And how much can you just keep trying to bang that wall before it's like, okay, this wall is not going. We're going to have to find a different wall. You're going to have to poke a different area of the fence. And is that a drive wasted? Is that 2 drives wasted? And how many drives can you afford to waste when Michigan is going to just try to hold on to the ball so that they can shorten the game? And so it's almost like, well, we can't waste too much time trying to find the weak spot of the fence. Let's just go to another area. And then the thought is, well, but if you just keep banging on it, it's eventually going to fall. That's what Ryan Day has said about pounding the rock until the rock cracks. You wonder if they can spend enough time doing that, or if they feel like, no, we need points somewhere else. Now, Tom, they're in their own head.
Right. Yeah. Then you get into the, Ryan Day will talk about how you have to pound the rock and eventually the rock cracks, but Ryan Day will also talk about how he's stubborn sometimes and will, he will be stubborn in the run game and run it too much. And then he'll also talk about being stubborn and, he, at the end of the game, it's like, well, I should have run the ball a lot more than I did. Like he feels like he gets in sort of a rut play calling wise, where it's too much running or it's too much passing. And, this is not just, sort of like Twitter analysis where you run the ball and it doesn't work. And it's like, you should have thrown it. It's, this is Ryan Day saying this stuff post game. Like, yeah, I should have, thrown the ball more. I should have run the ball more. And, I think I have, if I was an Ohio State fan, I would have concerns about some of the Ryan Day big game tendencies where he'll get a little pass happy in big games. And Ohio State's offense, when it sort of starts falling off track in big games where you get the games where they're scoring 27 points, they'll be able to move the ball and you get into the red zone and then it bogs down and you're kicking a bunch of field goals and you're going for it on 4th down and you're not making it because you can't run the ball in short yardage situations. That feels like that's where Ohio State loses this game, is if they get the ball in the red zone and then they can't punch it in and you're kicking a bunch of field goals. Because I have real concerns about Ohio State being able to run the ball in short yardage situations because they haven't been able to do that against bad defenses. Now you're facing a much better defense who's been pretty decent in those short yardage situations. Illinois ran the ball a decent amount on Michigan, but when they got into 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, they really struggled. I don't have any real reason to think Ohio State's going to be able to do that. And you can only throw the slant to Marvin Harrison on a 3rd and 1 so many times before Michigan adjusts to that. And if you can't run the ball on 3rd and short, 4th and short, that's going to be something that will ultimately come back and bite you at some point.
Yeah, and I don't even know how much we need to talk about the Ohio State passing game because, again, Michigan gave up 394 yards passing last year and won. Now, how much of that is Ohio State throwing because they're behind and the running game isn't working? There's a good 394 and there's a bad 394 or almost a meaningless 394. And when you're throwing because that's all you have, that's where it gets into the sort of the meaningless. But they still completed the passes, some incredible catches by some receivers in that game. But if Ohio State is one dimensional, I think Michigan likes their chances. And I think that, as I've said before, Ohio State can win by not running better than Michigan. But if they're one dimensional, then that's going to be a tough ask. And that's where Michigan's pass rush really gets good, is when you're one dimensional and they know you're going to pass. That's the same for a lot of people. But Jesse Minter, defensive coordinator, up and coming coach, a lot of people like his play calling, like a lot of his red zone packages and his third down packages. And it's those special areas that Ohio State has struggled with, the red zone, third down issues, third down and long. Obviously, it's not good for anybody. And that's where Ohio State doesn't want to be. That's where Michigan gets really, really good. And if they can force those situations, like I said, first down is going to be as important as third down in this, because if they can hold Ohio State on first down and stop that interior run and there's no gain, and now you've got 2nd and 10, then there's an incompletion. Now this is where Ohio State loses. So it's Tom, second down is also important. I think I'm just going to throw that out there.
You know what? It's also important, Tony. Third down. No, that's going to be a big one, because then you either have to make a decision on kicking or you have to you get another first down. So if Ohio State can win on first, second, and third down, I think they have a good chance of winning the game. Michigan, conversely, if they can win on first, second, and third down, like their chances. So yeah, it does feel to me like if Ohio State is in, every time you see Ohio State in 2nd and 5, if you're an Ohio State fan, you should be smiling. Every time you see Ohio State in 2nd and 9, if you're a Michigan fan, you should be smiling. It's first down. You still got a couple more chances. That little difference just feels like that's going to tell you, not, number one, that's going to tell you how well Ohio State's probably running the ball. And number two, that's going to tell you how much Ohio State has open to it on 2nd and 3rd down. Because if it's 2nd and 9 constantly, that means you're not running the ball, which means you're turning one-dimensional, which means then you're getting into predictable passing situations, which means you're weaponizing Michigan's pass rush, and Michigan can then keep those safeties deep, and you can bracket Marvin Harrison Jr. If Ohio State's constantly in, if you hear the Ohio State marching band playing that thing they do that sounds like a train when Mayan Williams is running the ball and it's 6 yards, 7 yards, and you hear them doing that train thing, that is probably the best thing you could possibly hear if you're an Ohio State fan watching that game. Because if they're in 2nd and 3, not 2nd and 5, 2nd and 3, then that's a real problem for Michigan, because that means Ohio State is out Michiganing Michigan, and Michigan doesn't have a chance to out Ohio State. So that I think would be, the biggest thing that would be a positive for Ohio State. Do you see them being able to run the ball 5-7 yards on first down a lot? I sure don't. I feel like that's going to be a place where Ohio State struggles. And that's something where, if Ohio State is constantly in 2nd and 9, this is the When Michigan Wins show. So can Ohio State run the ball that much, or do you see them in 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9 kind of situations a lot, and then you're kind of in a messy spot? Well,
and I'll be fascinated to see the run pass breakdown on first down, because you don't have to run it on first down, but if you throw it and it's an incompletion, now you're at 2nd and 10, and now you're like, well, I still feel like we should run the ball at least once in this series, and then boom, it's a 1-yarder. Now you're at 3rd and 9. So it's just, you have to decide what you're going to do going in terms of, do you chase the balance, or do you chase the plays that are best for you? And yeah, you want to be balanced, but running on 2nd and 10 isn't necessarily a good play if Michigan is stopping the run at that point. But you also have to find out if you can run the ball. And so it's going to be fascinating to watch, and looking forward to it. Tom, let's do our pie in the sky best case scenario for Michigan. What do you got?
I think the pie in the sky scenario is either Corum or Edwards is healthy enough to be somewhat effective, and they can run the ball. And I mean, I guess the pie in the sky is that Corum is healthy enough to give them 12 carries for 80 yards or something. Like I don't think there's a scenario where Blake Corum just goes, nuclear and runs for 300 yards. With as compromised as he is, I think you get enough out of him that you're effective in the run game. You get a little bit out of Donovan Edwards. He hits a big play in the pass game. You have JJ McCarthy pick up a couple third downs with his legs. You have just the constant, you constantly hear the Ohio State third down music, and Michigan just keeps picking up third downs. Michigan finishes, 8 for 12 on third downs, or 9 for 16 on third downs, or something like that. And you're just kind of constantly keeping the chains moving. And they're 9 for 16 on third downs, but they're also 3 for 3 on fourth down, or something like that. And you're just constantly keeping the chains moving. And Ohio State can't run the ball at all. And the interior of that defensive line just kind of suffocates Ohio State. You're getting Ohio State into 3rd and 9. Then the pass rush, you can bring the pass rush, and that game is not a real style points game necessarily, but that's a Michigan 31, Ohio State 20 kind of game, maybe. I mean, something like that, where if you hold Ohio State under 30 points, you get a chance to win. And I think that's probably 34-20 maybe that's the best case scenario for Michigan, something in that range. But that there's a lot of ifs there. But just like with the Ohio State best case scenario, there's a lot of ifs there too.
Yeah, I'm not convinced Blake Corum is going to give them anything, but I think if Donovan Edwards is good enough to go, then he is good enough to do something in both in the passing game and the running game. And as I said, from years of watching this, just expect whoever is that running back to have at least a 30 or 40 yarder in there. Something hits, and then another pass will hit, and you'll have some tight end down the field. I'm convinced they're going to connect on at least one shot of 40 yards or so down the field. That's going to happen. We've seen some breakage in coverage as well. And so you don't necessarily need to have a 50-50 ball. You can throw a guy who is wide open 75 yards down the field. Not that the pass is 75 yards down the field, but you can get like a 75-yard touchdown out of it, because there have been some breakdowns in communication there. So it's not even about fitting the ball into a tight window at times with this secondary. You just have to give your receiver a chance to catch the ball, and that's something that JJ McCarthy has struggled with. But I think pie in the sky, and even just not even pie in the sky, I'm expecting this to happen. I believe it will happen. They'll hit a couple of shots deep, and pie in the sky is one or two more, or some pass interferences. I do think whether it's Luke Schoonmaker or Colston Loveland, he may end up leading Colston Loveland may end up leading the team in receptions, and he's a difficult matchup, and he keeps the chains moving. But I also think JJ McCarthy is going to pick up some third downs with his legs, and it's the most frustrating thing for a defense. And then you start to get, to question yourself. You start to get frustrated. You might start getting some retaliation penalties or just some unforced errors because you're so frustrated by this guy who picks up a third down on 3rd and 13 when you think you've won. You think you've won because you've held them to a 3rd and 13, and then he picks up 14 on a scramble, and you got to do it all over again after you were so close to getting off the field. And there will be a drive or two that ends up in a touchdown. And whether that's McCarthy picking it up or a face mask or something like that, we've seen this defense almost get off the field a number of times. And when they penalize themselves, those get turned into points. And often in the season for the Buckeyes, if you just don't hurt yourself, the offense isn't good enough to hurt you. But I think Michigan will make some plays in this one. And pie in the sky, I think you throw in a defensive score or something like that to help out. We've seen Michigan just overwhelm. Like they shouldn't have had, let's go through just real quick, and I just want to bring up their scores. 34 against Maryland, 27 against Iowa, 31 against Indiana. The 41 against 17 was just this overwhelming thing, and the Rutgers thing. So I think you look in the 30s, and something like that, like would you say like a 34-20 or, 34-23, 37-23, something like that. That's a lot of points for Michigan, though. We haven't seen them do that. And to expect them to do that without Blake Corum when they were doing all of these things with Blake Corum, I think it's hard for me to see them getting into the high 30s, maybe not even the mid 30s. So like a 31-20, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the pie in the sky, they get into the mid to high 30s. I think the realistic path to victory for Michigan is you make Ohio State kick a bunch of field goals in the red zone, you limit the possessions, and you win 27-23. I think that's the realistic path to victory for Michigan. And I do think that's a realistic path where that is something I could absolutely see happening. If everything goes right and things really snowball for Ohio State and you get the one turnover, like, okay, it's 38-20 or something like that. That's the equivalent of the, Ohio State 49-17 kind of win where, it's a real edge case. It could happen, but, it requires an awful lot of stuff to go right for one team and wrong for the other.
Absolutely. So that will do it for this episode. Again, undo those thumbs downs, please, folks. This is just an exercise, a thought exercise, just like the previous show. But we do want to thank you for tuning in. And, of course, if you'd like to say something negative to us, you can do that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You'll have to sign up, post it to us on the message board. We'll delete it. But if you want to get it out, go ahead and do that. And also, if you're watching this, a thumbs up, a subscription, hitting the bell to be notified when we go live. We drop videos like this. Maybe not like this one later in the year, but obviously we've got tons of content coming your way. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys later.